Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to my talk, and I'll present our work on our study of the Ethereum arbitrage ecosystem. So first, what is arbitrage? Well, simply put, at a high level, arbitrage is just buying an asset in one location and then selling it somewhere else for advantageously differing prices. Consider a very simple real-world example. Maybe at one location you can buy a tomato for $2 per tomato, and then by just crossing the street you can sell it somewhere else for $4. Well, obviously you make money every single time you do this, so you would probably do it all day long. Or at least until the shopkeepers get wise to the scheme and update their prices. This is a normal and expected facet of financial markets, and some would even consider it a good thing, as it tends to move assets from where they are more abundant and cheaper to where they're scarce and more expensive. Ethereum also has exchanges where you can buy and sell assets. We're going to be talking about ERC20 tokens. And although this exists in many forms, the most prominent one is by exchanging with an automated market maker. What are these? They are smart contracts on the Ethereum blockchain, and they allow users to automatically swap between two different kinds of tokens for an automatically determined price. These smart contracts maintain something called a liquidity pool. This is a set of reserves of sometimes two, usually two, but maybe more types of tokens. And in order to perform a swap, a user first deposits some money into the pool. The smart contract computes a fair price, subtracts off a little bit of fee, and then emits the token that they're purchasing back to the user. How does the liquidity pool fill up? Well, users may also provide liquidity into the pool in order to share in the fees that are extracted every single swap. We see in the bottom corner a swap invariant for a typical market maker called the constant product market maker. It exists, but you don't need to know the details. At a high level, understand that typically the prices are automatically computed based on the ratio of the balances of the different tokens that are held in reserves. There are many reasons why arbitrage is attractive on the Ethereum blockchain. First, Ethereum has many different independent applications that are automated market makers, and all of them update prices publicly and independently of one another as users perform swap actions and other types of trades. Second, there's limited risk. In the real-world scenario, maybe while you're carrying your tomatoes, you trip and fall, and then your product is ruined. That's not really possible on the Ethereum blockchain, as transactions are atomic. If anything at all goes wrong during the process of buying or selling, you can simply revert the transaction, and then all buy and sell orders are undone as if they had never occurred. This is no secret. Bots, of course, actively exploit these markets in order to extract profit by doing arbitrage. We know that this is a highly competitive environment and that annual profits are probably somewhere around $100 million. Why do we care about it, though? Well, there are two reasons, and I'll talk about them briefly. So the first is because of MEV. You might have heard that term, and I'll call it miner extractable value here just for simplicity. At a high level, this concept is the idea that a miner is able to extract more than the typical block reward by selectively censoring, inserting, or reordering transactions. Arbitrage is one of these types of transactions that a miner would be able to insert in order to boost their profits from producing a block. But it turns out, as we'll see later in the presentation, this actually isn't even necessary any longer, as bots typically provide a majority of the profit that they gain from arbitrage directly to the block producer anyway, as a sort of bribe for priority access to the blockchain. The reason we're concerned about MEV is that it may incentivize something called a time bandit attack. Because of time, I can't really get into it too much, but I'll give you a very, very high view of what it is. Here you can see a depiction of a blockchain where the block reward is fairly steady, but one block has an extremely high block reward due to MEV. What we would like the block producers to do is continue extending the blockchain in the normal manner. However, they may be incentivized instead to fork the blockchain and attempt to fight to see who is the one to produce that block with excessive reward. And this might cause instability. So that's one reason we might be concerned about that. Another reason we're concerned is because of price oracle manipulation. I talked about automated market makers and how they allow you to swap between different assets. Well, they also provide spot price quotes to different types of financial instruments that operate on the blockchain. And it's important that these are accurate price quotes. Pretty quickly in the development of the AMM ecosystem, we noticed that these spot prices can be manipulated by people placing very large buy or sell orders. As a defense to this manipulation, they placed a time-weighted average price oracle in most modern-day AMMs. This requires that the manipulation be maintained over a long period of time in order to reflect a change in the spot price from this oracle. In this sense, arbitrage is actually good, as it contributes toward this defense. If a manipulator attempts to change the price dramatically on just this exchange, they're going to have to fight arbitragers that are taking profit by leveling the prices back in line with the rest of exchanges. In this sense, it's actually quite important that arbitrage is regularly taken, and some prior work suggests that this may not be the case. So we really ought to investigate if that's completely true. Our study is broken into two separate parts. First, we look at what real-world arbitrage activity was performed by bots. What sort of patterns do we see these bots perform, and what are the trends? This is what we're looking for. And the reason we're looking is because, of course, these bots are quite opaque with how they perform their actions. They don't want to reveal their secrets and how they're making profit out in the open. And second, we go and ourselves go attempt to detect opportunities to take arbitrage. And we do this by a historical analysis. And we look at how much profit can be made from arbitrage, how long do these arbitrages persist, and in general, look for insights from that. First, our analysis of the real-world arbitrages. We do this by graph analysis of the ERC20 token flows within a single transaction. And we do that because ERC20 token trades are standardized. We first infer what exchanges were used by, and this is quite simple, looking for a smart contract that received one token and emitted another, good enough. We then construct a graph of these token flows, and we look for cycles. Why do we look for cycles? Well, I talked about how arbitrage is selling an asset and then buying it back. This forms sort of a closed loop. Here you can see in an example that loop also includes an intermediate hop through another asset. That's totally fine, but ultimately it has to come back to the same asset, okay? So we do cycle detection, and then we analyze the cycle to see what token was taken as profit, how much profit was gained, and who profited. I'll dig into some of the results that we have. Of course, there's much more in our papers, so definitely check it out. We identify 3.8 million arbitrages over the study period of 28 months. In total, we find that they extracted about $321 million worth of profit. And the most arbitraged exchanges are Uniswap, V2 and V3, SushiSwap Balancer, and a selection of others. It's important to note here that the tail on this graph is actually quite long, extending out to the right edge here. And we were able to observe this long tail by using our generic analysis of token flows. Here's some characteristics of the arbitrages we observed. First of all, overwhelmingly, arbitrage bot operators tend to perform just one single arbitrage per transaction. These arbitrages tend to be rather small in the number of exchanges they use, typically just 2 or 3. Although we did observe some going all the way up to 5, 6, 7, and at the extreme 12. Overall, vastly, these bots prefer to take their profit in wrapped ether, which makes sense as wrapped ether has the most trading pairs with other tokens in the ecosystem. And overall profit is rather small per transaction, somewhere around $10. We also see that backrunning is currently a dominant strategy. This is the strategy of selectively, carefully inserting an arbitrage immediately after the transaction that opens the possibility of performing the arbitrage. Despite these backrunning transactions being a minority of arbitrages, they're actually dominating in terms of profit taking. So this shows that adding some of this sophistication does boost profit. We show that the block producer's share of profits is steadily climbing up. In fact, it's now close to 95% of the profit taken from arbitrage goes directly to the block producer as a bribe for priority access into the blockchain. As a side note, go check out our paper, but we also notice some arbitrage lookalikes that are in fact sandwich attacks if you look quite closely. I won't go into details here for time, but check out our paper Future work that researches arbitrage definitely needs to take these into account. We were in fact fooled by this as well, and overcounted first by $5 billion, a quite dramatic figure, so please consider that. Okay, let's talk about our opportunity detection system. Our strategy is first to limit the scope, but we limit it generously according to our measurements from the previous section. We detect arbitrages, and then once we find them, we verify the possibility by running the arbitrage on a private fork of the blockchain. And then we apply a fee estimated based on what arbitrageurs were paying in terms of fees about that time in history using those types of exchanges. We execute two different groups. Our first group is the large arbitrages that allegedly profit over one ether. And we find that the vast majority of these fail when you attempt to take the arbitrage. Why is that? Well, it's because for the majority of cases, when you attempt to transfer the token, the transaction reverts. The token doesn't allow any transfers at that moment. So there's no way you can actually buy the token and complete the arbitrage. This highlights how it's important when you're studying arbitrage activity to actually perform the concrete transaction to verify feasibility. And we suspect that prior work was likely overestimating arbitrage activity possibility on the blockchain. Some, in fact, did do this execution, including Tin from 2019. We also find that the average duration here is just 1 block, which is nice and short. However, the 75th percentile can go up to 4 blocks, which does get a little bit on the long side. We also execute about a month's worth of random selected arbitrages. And we find that the failure rate is much lower here, which makes sense. Most of these profit only a little bit of money. So it should be the case. However, we find that after applying fees, only about 1% of these are profitable. And that's also sort of intuitive. If you look at this graph, it seems that by selecting arbitrage possibilities randomly, they either exist for, they're either very cheap and exist for a few blocks, or they're quite expensive and exist for a very short amount of time because they will be taken, but generally not both. We find that our weekly profit estimate could be somewhere around $42,000, although it's difficult to say because we didn't actually run this in the competitive environment. To go over what we've talked about, most arbitrage is among just a handful of popular exchanges. The strategies are actually rather simple. The block producer's share of profit is slowly marching upward, and that's something to keep an eye on. Arbitrage opportunities are generally taken fairly quickly, but not too quickly. And it is absolutely essential to go and execute arbitrages to verify the opportunity, as a lot of them, in fact, aren't feasible in practice. With that, I'd like to thank you for attending my talk, and I'll take questions.